Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Ghosts and Spirits video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's do another entry here. This one yet again based on one of your newer suggestions. This one having to do more with an example or a subject matter rather than, let's say, a specific ghost itself. Sometimes I do these because it's a great way just talk about a particular topic rather than examples of the topic, and then that way it's more of a broader approach. And it's a good way of discovering new things. Like in this case, this particular subject, I never heard of it before. So others out there, if you haven't heard of it either, it's a great way to be able to showcase it here. But it has to do with yet another supernatural paranormal entity, in this case that's tied to a set of ghost animals, and it's known as the Church Grim. So let's go ahead and let's talk about all the fascinating info associated with these entities. So what are these Church Grims? Well, they're apparently found in English countrysides, maybe even in Swedish countrysides, Finnish countrysides, mainly tied to churches surrounding those areas. I don't know if there's any like specific example of an exact church that you can visit for something like this, but still, this is a good information to have in case you are in those areas and you happen to come across one of the old-time churches. If you see this example somewhere around there, especially late at night, then you'll know that you're dealing with this involving a church grim. So as far as what it is, it's essentially a spirit of an animal that dwells within that church. Rather than, let's say, being a bad spirit or an evil spirit, it's more in the lines of a protector of the church itself. And so this could take on various forms. The most common form is the form of a dog, specifically a black dog. When I was reading this information, it reminded me of one of my past videos of the Black Shook, which I'll include the link for below. But in this case, this is definitely more of a protector, a loyal spirit, something that is on the side of good, especially considering what it's trying to protect. Other animals that it comes in the form as is apparently horses. I've seen sheep, goats, lambs, rams, and then also roosters, if you could believe it. So all these animals it can take the form of, but more specifically, it happens to be of a black dog. Now, what it's protecting against is this. Anybody that happens to have any bad thoughts or any bad intentions towards the church, that's what it's protecting against. It could be people themselves, like people that are trying to commit theft within the church or trying to destroy the church, do anything bad for it. When that happens, then they see this animal coming across it, then that's when they'll know that they're dealing with this church grim, because it's not an animal. It's essentially the spirit of the animal protecting it fiercely. But more importantly, it's trying to protect it against other paranormal or spiritual entities. Those can include demons, those can include other ghosts, poltergeists, apparently even the devil himself. If he tries to make an appearance there by that location, then that's when this church grim will come out and make its presence known. And I don't know exactly how it protects it or how far it'll go to protect the area. Presumably it can include even up to, I don't know, killing anybody that's trying to create very bad things within the church itself. But at least that's what it's there for. That's its intention. And then it oversees the church pretty much forever. Now, how these church grims come about, though, is pretty much an unfortunate tale. It's a tale of tragedy, especially for the poor animal dealing with it during that time. So here's how it goes. The idea is, and this is part of especially English folklore, if you go to those churches, at least back then, who knows if it's still happening now, presumably not, but at least back then it was. The idea was when a new church was created, brand new from scratch, there was a belief that in order to protect the church, there would have to be somebody guarding it. And the way they guarded it was whoever first set foot on that church would be the guardian. And that would be a guardian that would be there forever, pretty much, at least until something else happens, when I'll explain more in a minute. So the idea was nobody wanted to really sacrifice themselves for it. They didn't want to become this church grim on a voluntary basis, like in terms of people doing it themselves. So it came about that there was instead an animal that would be sacrificed. It would be killed. And the way it would be killed is either it would be humanely killed, or under worse conditions, it would actually be buried alive. And for some reason, it was decided that dogs, especially black dogs, would be the best animals for these. So these poor dogs, they were killed right after the church was built, and then they would be buried towards the northern side of the church itself. And then that way, once the church started, once it had its sermons and it continued with its weekly activities, this guard dog from the very beginning, this church grim, because it was killed and buried there on the north side, it would forever be protecting that location. At least that's how the story goes when it comes to these church grims, how they were sacrificed in terms of these dogs or these animals. Because again, it could be other animals that would be listed as well, like all the ones I mentioned beforehand, and all had to die with all these religious traditions associated with those churches. Now, the other notion is this. Sometimes it is a person that happens to be the church grim itself, but it's not because of being sacrificed. Instead, it's this. It's the notion that whoever is buried there at the church, let's say something happens to them, they die from natural causes, or they get killed in an accident, something like that, then when they're buried at the church, that soul, whoever that person is, the last one buried there, they in turn become the voluntary or involuntary church grim protector for that location. So if you die, in other words, and let's say you get buried in that church, then your soul is now tied to that church as its protector, at least until the next person dies and then gets buried in that church. So someone's time as a specific churchyard grim or church grim all happens to do with however long it takes for the next person to die and then be buried within those grounds itself. And that's how the tradition goes. It would be one person after another, and then you would be released, and then you would continue to, I guess, go wherever it was that the church there and this religion said you would go in terms of your soul afterward. Fascinating, no? The idea as far as all these things involving protectors of the church, and then also whether it's animals in one case, and then also people in another case, all of them tied to this specific location and making sure that these church grounds do not have anything bad happen to them. Another interesting thing to note is that apparently this stuff also not just occurs with churches, but other physical landmarks, like in this case, a bridge. In fact, the bridge you're looking at here can be apparently associated with a paranormal activity. It's known as the Kilgram Bridge, and this was a bridge that was created because it was apparently tied to the sacrifice of a dog that was placed there. I don't know if it was either to 100% to protect it, but more along the lines of a sacrifice in its creation. So the idea goes that this bridge, this area surrounding it, attempts were made to have this bridge built, but all these weather conditions, these floods and other type of weather environments was just making it impossible. So people were stating that how are they going to get this bridge done, especially since it's needed because people have to cross over it. Well, apparently the devil came across that area, heard their pleas, and then stated he will help the creation of this bridge as long as there's one condition, and that is whoever crosses the bridge, that'll be the first sacrifice, and then that person will be essentially claimed to the devil afterward. So he created the bridge, he listed the bridge ready to go, and of course people were at a point in the road where they had to decide what to do because nobody wanted to cross the bridge at that point. And so they did a little trick. They did a little workaround with regards to the devil's promise. So instead of a person crossing the bridge, they actually had a dog do it. And how they did it was this. The owner, some shepherd, swam across the bottom of the river. How he was able to do so, I don't know, because again, reading the stories and the weather conditions and the flooding making it pretty bad to do so. Somehow he found the way to get across it. And then that way he reached the other side without touching the bridge. And then he had his dog, his faithful dog, called and from across the other side. And the dog naturally ran across the bridge. Well, lo and behold, once that happened, then the devil's promise kicked in and the dog was sacrificed. And so apparently, if you go there to this day, that's the stories tied to that bridge. And you may even see that dog there as well. Whether it's protecting the bridge or whether it's staying there over from its sacrifice, who knows? But that's also a loose variation of a church grim, but in this case, it's more on the lines of something tied to a specific location, in this case, the bridge itself. But interesting stuff. What do you guys think? I haven't even touched other areas like Scandinavian folklore that also has various other church grims, and then also Finnish folklore that also has other church grims as well. All other topics that I may talk about in other future videos, but at least in this case, I wanted to share it here. But if anyone is there in the English area and happens to know any specific churches that fall into this category, please post those comments. It'd be great to have any specific examples of someone that knows there's a church. That's a church that's guarded by a specific church grim. That's one where you can visit and then come across these things and then see it for yourself. So if anyone wants to post a comment on that, then please go ahead. And then anyone else with more experience about these church grims, maybe you might have seen in other areas, then please post those comments below as well. All right, everyone. Thanks again as always. Take care.